Are the vaccines safe? We're going to discuss that today as well. What happens when the CDC switches course, reverses course, backtracks, double backtracks? I think they destroy credibility. Come on, everybody. Let's go take a look. Hello, everyone. Dr. Chris Martinson here. Really pleased to be back with you here. Episode 002. We're starting to record our episodes, numbering them from when we started up again, and we had our first Hey, I'm Back video very recently. This is May 18th episode. I'm calling this one Dying with versus Dying of COVID. Important topic, and that's where the CDC comes in again. And then we're going to talk about vaccine safety. Again, I'm just using pure CDC data and also, of course, studies and scientific data and stuff like that. So for anybody out there who's thinking of maybe this is a dangerous topic worthy of censoring, no, I'm just going to be talking absolutely data that's publicly available, that's scientific in nature. So let's get started without much further ado. I want to start here. Hey, so a couple of changes I gotta let you know about. First, this is my website, Peak Prosperity, up here, and going to be a lot of changes there at the website. Second, I'm in my new studio, and part of that new studio, helping and driving and running all the technology, is Livio. You'll hear me talk his name a few times. Hey, Livio, how you doing over there?
I'm doing all right, Chris.
All right, good. So, hey, we're going to start here. The CDC director is criticized for now differentiating between dying from versus dying with COVID. Now, here's the big deal. We knew that when COVID deaths were being recorded, there was a little bit of a murkiness there. When people were dying of COVID, they say over 500,000 Americans have died of COVID. But in fact, it was a little wishy-washy because, in fact, people could have died for all sorts of reasons, and they were still recorded as having died of COVID. Now, this is actually an important point because statistics ought to be really, really consistent and clear and clean. So now that people are being vaccinated with either, the mRNA vaccines, which is the Moderna and or the Pfizer, as well as maybe the attenuated vaccine viruses, which would be the J&J or the AstraZeneca. We'll get to those in just a minute. But look what's being distinguished now. Let's get right in here. Let me get my drawing tool out. Got to get my fancy drawing tool out. Says here, the new CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, drew criticism on Sunday for her method of identifying COVID-19 deaths in the U.S., making a sudden and new distinction between those who died from the virus and those who died with it. Hey, I'm all for that distinction, but I'm also for consistency. That's what this channel is all about, is having consistent, verifiable, repeatable sort of experiences with data, with life, all of that. All right, during an interview on CNN's State of the Union, Walensky was asked about vaccinated Americans who have contracted the virus and whether anyone has died from an infection despite being inoculated. That means vaccinated. Walensky said the CDC is aware of 223 so-called breakthrough infections in vaccinated Americans, but clarified that many of those individuals died due to other causes. So So you see what we're setting up here, of course, is that everything that can possibly be done to show that the vaccines are effective and good and that they work, and anything that might detract from that, such as the idea that somebody could be vaccinated and still die, they're working hard to minimize that. I understand why. From a public health standpoint, they're saying, hey, we don't want anybody to have any vaccine skepticism, hesitancy, all of that. We want everybody to be vaccinated. It's a worthy goal. However, I think they do themselves a disservice, all the national bodies do a disservice when they have different standards for how they're going to treat vaccinated and the results from vaccinated individuals versus, say, any other possible condition or I can't even say the words anymore, of course, because you know about the censorship, right? All the censorship we're up against. Formerly, we called them DWISBN, which is an acronym for drugs which shall not be named. You see the double standards, right? Certain things like remdesivir, hey, every possible chance to skate on through and let's interpret the results in the most favorable possible light. And then other things get a very different treatment, and it's super easy to spot. If you're a data person, if you're a scientist, if you're just even moderately curious and you can read between the lines, you see these differential treatments. So that's what's happening here with this whole idea of being very careful all of a sudden with the distinction died of COVID versus died with COVID. If we applied that same standard, the question would be, how many people died of COVID? And the CDC, of course, had a very, when they did that exercise last year in 2020, they came up with a number that said maybe 6% of people who had been recorded as having died of COVID, you could classify as purely having died of COVID. Other people, of course, dying from other comorbidities and other things like that. So just a distinction. But note here, they say here, continuing on, not all of those 223 cases who had COVID actually died of COVID. She said they may have had mild disease, but died, for example, of a heart attack. It's a useful distinction to draw, of course. It's a good one. Why weren't we drawing that distinction all the way through 2020 as well? It's a great question to ask. There really isn't a good answer for that if one of the things you're concerned about is having that sort of consistency that's required to create trust and to be able to lead people effectively and to communicate effectively with people. Here's rule one of communication, Martinson style. You have to be clear and consistent. And I've been arguing that all the way through, right from the get-go. It's like if you remember a long time ago, and I didn't bring it, I should show it though. I said, here's, the 4-point plan for getting through a pandemic. And one of those was clear, consistent messaging all the way through. Absolutely something that has to happen. So look at this. One Twitter user wrote that they quoted in this article, after all this time, we're going to start distinguishing died with COVID from died from COVID. How anyone lives with the dishonest reporting of numbers is beyond me. Either we treat all the deaths with the same questioning or none of them. Period. I actually agree with that. It's really important when you're trying to run a business through data, if you're trying to run a country with data, if you're trying to do anything with data, you got to be consistent. You got to make sure you understand exactly what you're doing. So this sudden, rapid pivot by the CDC, it's okay if you want to pivot to died with versus died of and all that stuff. That's fine. But you got to explain to yourself. And I think it's incumbent on you to take some of your multi-billion-dollar budget and go back and recalculate the old numbers to be consistent so we can do this consistently across. Otherwise, it kind of looks like you're trying to stack the deck to make something look better than it otherwise might. And that makes people suspicious, which undermines your effort to gain the trust of people in order to get your policy through. Seems simple to me. I don't know. All right, continuing on. About those breakthrough cases, the CDC did another big thing that they tried to sneak through. I know a lot of you saw this because many of you sent this to me. So what is a breakthrough case? That means people have been fully vaccinated. It's been more than a couple weeks after their second vaccine in the case of the mRNA vaccines. And then they still get an infection. So what is a breakthrough case then? How are they defining that? Okay, so well, here's how they're doing it. They are investigating SARS-CoV-2 detected infections among people who received the vaccine. So they want to see how many people this is. But notice here, they tried to sneak this in. To be defined as a breakthrough case, the clinical specimens for sequencing should have an RT-PCR, that little CT, that's a critical thing, that CT right there, cycle threshold value of under 28. Yeah! We've been talking about this probably over a year ago. We started educating people about the cycle thresholds, and without going all the way back into that data, roughly speaking, the cycle threshold says that as you're running the PCR test on people, you have to run cycle after cycle after cycle. You're doubling the signal, double the signal. There's a point after which you can detect that somebody had an SARS-CoV-2 infection, but it's meaningless because they're not going to be clinically relevant. They're not going to actually have a disease. They wouldn't be able to either transmit it or they wouldn't even get COVID or any other symptoms from it. So there's a cycle threshold that we argued shouldn't have been any higher than 30, 33 at the most. And we were running cycle thresholds of 40 and calling those cases, not even detected infections, cases. So again, all this murkiness, changing stuff around, definitions that don't mean anything. What's a case? What's an infection? Here, they said in order for a post-vaccinated person to be counted as a breakthrough case, they had to have a cycle threshold below 28. So again, move the goalposts in a very favorable way for the vaccines. They were unwilling to move those goalposts while we were going through these so-called explosions in cases. Why was that important? Because it meant that when we were reporting to ourselves that we had massive cases in an area, that epidemiologically, from a public health standpoint, those were meaningless numbers. I mean, if we said we had 1 million cases in the LA area, for instance, that were active, but they were all at 40 or above on the cycle threshold scale, it's meaningless because literally 0 of those cases would be able to transmit or be infective or lead to hospitalizations. So what do you do when you have a whole bunch of cases being reported that don't actually mean anything from an epidemiological or health standpoint? It's useless, it's garbage, it's noise. So here what they've done is they've very rightly dialed the noise back to a meaningful level. Cycle threshold under 28, I'm totally down with that. That's good news. But we have to ask why now? Why wasn't that the standard all the way through? Why was it that I and many other people were able to report that that's where it should have been a year ago, and only now we're finding out about that it's being applied a little late, but only once vaccines are actually on board. So anyway, make of that what you will. So let's move to the CDC website right now. We want to talk about vaccines. We want to talk about vaccine safety. The CDC is very clear about this. They say who should and who shouldn't get the shot. Let's talk about this real quick because this is going to be important for the next piece of data I want to talk about. It says here, by the way, I link everything. You see the link down here? So you can find those links down below in the description to this. And as well, we post all of this stuff back at Peak Prosperity. So if you're wondering where my data comes from, how I made my conclusions, what's the source material for anything that I report on, I provide all the links. That's how we roll at Peak Prosperity. All right, let's look at this. Here's the CDC saying if you have a severe allergic reaction to a COVID-19 vaccine, so what does that mean? Severe allergic reaction, also known as anaphylaxis. That's a condition where your body immune system just goes haywire, your throat closes, you get hives, you're in danger of being unable to breathe, things like that. That's anaphylaxis. So if you've had a severe allergic reaction after getting the first shot of a COVID-19 vaccine, CDC recommends that you not get the second shot of that vaccine. Hey, makes a ton of sense, right? Because that second shot is actually where your immune system goes really on fire, and that's where people report stronger sets of secondary reactions, severe reactions, mild reactions, whatever they're going to have. Whatever reaction you have to the second shot typically is going to be stronger than to the first shot. Why? Because your body's all tuned up and ready to fight. And then you get the second shot and it comes and it fights. And so you get that immune response. So they're saying here, if you've had the first shot, you had an anaphylactic reaction, don't get the second shot. Makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go further. If you've had an anaphylactic reaction to any vaccine prior in life, you probably shouldn't get the shot either, right? That just sort of makes sense. The question it raises then is what happens with the so-called vaccine passports? What happens with these businesses that are starting to define for themselves that if you're not fully vaccinated, you can't come to the baseball game, you can't ride on our airplane, whatever those conditions are. What about the people who had anaphylaxis? Do they get to participate? We don't have any definition around that right now, but for sure, if you had the first shot and you had a really strong bad reaction to it, the CDC saying don't get the second shot. All right, but you know what? That's pretty rare. We're going to define how rare that is in just a second. But first, I want to also note that they say, too, that if you've had a non-severe allergic reaction, okay, so here it says if you've had an immediate allergic reaction after getting a shot of COVID-19 vaccine, you should not get a second shot of that vaccine, even if your allergic reaction was not severe enough to require emergency care. If the reaction was after an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, that's either the Pfizer and or the Moderna, you should not get the second shot, they say here, of either of these vaccines. An immediate allergic reaction happens within 4 hours of getting vaccinated and may include symptoms such as hives, swelling, wheezing, the inability, dyspnea, they would call it on the CDC VAERS Vaccine Adverse Event Report system. And your doctor may refer you to a specialist in allergies and so on. All right, so that's it. If you're having an allergic reaction to these things, don't get the second one. I would go further and say if you've had severe allergic reactions to prior vaccines, you might want to talk with your doctor about that too and maybe not get these vaccines in the first place. So this brings us to this idea of Okay, how safe are these vaccines? We've heard a lot. We had several 100 million doses administered in the United States, probably billion doses worldwide at this point in time. So we have a lot of information to work with around how safe they are. Good news, they're really pretty safe. Bad news, they're not completely safe. And so I just want to go through this very quickly now, and we'll talk through what this means. Let me pull this up. So start here. First up, when we say a vaccine, what are we talking about? Okay. You have your mRNA vaccines. Those are either the Pfizer or the Moderna. Those two are mRNA, standing for messenger RNA vaccines. Or you have down at the bottom of the list the J&J or the Janssen down here, or the AstraZeneca. These are all a different type of a vaccine based on an old platform. It's an adenovirus vector. They take a type of a virus that you probably haven't been exposed to, and they put a piece of the COVID virus into that, and then they give you that, just a piece of the coronavirus. They put it into it, and then your body reacts to that. Okay, so but they're very different. They have very different safety profiles. They have very different everything's about them. By the way, you might have heard that AstraZeneca one, which is that adenovirus vaccine. Recently, it was Eric Clapton came out and said he really wished he hadn't touched the needle, as he put it. He said he feared he'd never play again. He had a really bad time, disastrous time, as he called it, with a vaccine. That was AstraZeneca. Said he couldn't feel his hands, lost sensation, was really, really ill for a while. And those vaccines, the AstraZeneca and the J&J, those are ones you just get one shot of, just one. So he got the shot, didn't said it was pretty bad experience for him. So at any rate, but that's an N of one. Listen, we got to go through the data. What is the data? So, hey, pretty cool thing came out in the LA Times in April. I wanted to go through it because I think it's illustrative of the kind of reporting that we're getting out of the mainstream media. Again, is it fair? Is it balanced? Is it a little, spin cycle salesy to sort of make things seem better than they are? Let's take a quick peek. All right. The dangers of COVID-19. Here's how they lead off with that LA Times article. They say the dangers of COVID-19 far outweigh the vaccine risk. I'm going to take exception with this, but first let's talk about it. Per million residents, 6,200 and some odd COVID-19 hospitalizations per million residents. Already, I don't know how they've put this graph together. Does that mean per million people who got the coronavirus, or with an average level of infectivity through a population? It's unclear how that's put together, but they say 6,200 plus people out of a million end up in the hospital. Out of that million, you're going to get 1,693 or whatever that is deaths. But look, out of a million doses administered, you only have 52 reports of a serious reaction to the vaccine. So looks like the vaccine is going to be a lot safer. Also left out of this, though, is what they're talking about clearly is, and assuming we can trust the base data. Get to that in a second. What they're saying here is the safety of the vaccines based on what we know about them so far. Right? We don't have any long-term data around these vaccines. We don't know what happens to people in a year or 2 years, or if people have to get a second booster in 6 months or 8 months or a year, or third booster, or if people are mixing and matching vaccine types, you get the AZ and then you get the mRNA or whatever. We don't know any of that stuff yet. So all they can possibly be comparing here is early safety data, which is around what happens in the immediate days, weeks, and sometimes months after people get a shot. Okay, just to be clear, I just want to make sure we're talking apples to apples here. All right, carrying on then. LA Times article, they talked about it like this. They said each of these little gray squares on this, and there's a lot of them. I don't know, there's maybe 30 or something across the top here. And so each, if you can see those on the screen, each one of those little squares represents 15,000 vaccine doses. They're trying to represent 150 million shots have been administered, and they say 0.005% may have resulted in a serious side effect. That little half a square down there represents 0.005%. So that's a visual to say, wow, these things are really safe. And that's the good news. So let's go through that and take a peek at what we mean with that particular piece of data. All right, I'm going to have to find my little, where did I end up? Sorry, I skipped a little ahead here. There we are. All right, this is this LA Times article. There's a link at the bottom. As the push, they say here, to vaccinate as many Americans as possible against COVID-19 picks up steam, questions about the shot's safety have often hindered the campaign. So, again, we have to distinguish between the near-term safety and the long-term safety. I think those are important questions. So if you wanted to understand what are the long-term effects of these particular vaccines, the true answer is we don't know what those are yet because not enough time has passed for us to answer those questions yet. So again, they're talking about questions of safety. I think we need to be careful about whether we're talking short-term or long-term safety profiles, things like that. So polling, they say here, suggests around 30% of the public does not plan to get vaccinated. The chief reason being concerns about the side effects. According to the Pew Research Center, other surveys from Stanford University, Kaiser Family Foundation have found evidence that fears of side effects are contributing to some hesitancy to get the shot. Those are two words that you're going to hear a lot, is hesitancy and skeptic. You can be a vaccine skeptic or hesitant. We'll talk about what that actually means in just a minute, because I think there's a really good way to define that and think about it. So they're going to answer this question: is there anything to worry about? All right. So they start strong by saying that since the vaccine drive began in December, more than 150 million vaccine shots have been administered. And behind the massive rollout is a safety monitoring effort that government scientists have described as the most intense and comprehensive in U.S. history. Now that's interesting, this safety monitoring, because we all hear and we all know that the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, is weak. It's a weak system. Not all the side effects get reported in there. Not everything gets reported well. It's a little bit kind of like doctors can report in there, but so can patients, lawyers, like whatever. It's not a strong system. So I am currently unaware of anybody who's had the vaccine who's been contacted by the most intense and comprehensive safety monitoring effort in U.S. history. So I don't know what that means yet. So I'm hoping to find out what that really means, because we should be monitoring this, because let's be honest. We're really running the largest phase 2 trial in history with these vaccines, where we really ought to have a super comprehensive monitoring program, because there will be side effects, there will be long-term effects for some number of people, and we'll want to understand why. Of course, that's the nature of science. The bulk of people, totally fine. But for that subset, what is it? Was it a comorbidity? Is it something in their genetics? Was it the frequency of when they got exposed to COVID versus when they got the vaccine? There'll be things we'll want to understand. You only get that with a really intense and comprehensive data monitoring program. I'm not clear what that is yet, so I'd like to know more. So the LA Times here, they reviewed the scientific studies published thus far. See if they did. A little foreshadowing there. And interviewed half a dozen researchers. All the information points to the same conclusion: the shots are safe. Okay, that's a definition. We're going to want to see what they mean. I don't necessarily disagree, but I like my assertions backed up with data, as you know. And the small chance of experiencing a serious side effect from the vaccine is far outweighed by the danger of COVID-19. All right. So we're going to look into this just really quickly, but first I want to depart back to the CDC itself. And they say here, if you get a rash where you got the shot, the CDC has learned of reports that some people have experienced a red, itchy, swollen, or painful rash where they got the shot. The rashes can start a few days to more than a week after that first shot. Sometimes are quite large. They're also known as COVID arm. So that has a name, COVID arm. Very easy to look into this. But by the way, if you experience COVID arm after getting the first shot, you should still get the second shot. So this wouldn't qualify in the CDC. Remember I told you, they said if you have a severe or even serious allergic reaction, don't get the second shot. Apparently COVID arm is not an allergic reaction. Must be something else. By the way, what's it look like? It kind of looks like this. It's a rashy area. Sometimes it can be sort of blotchy and multi-center. Sometimes it can be really quite profound. Like this one here looks like a wine stain. It can be spread pretty far. At any rate, there are lots and lots of pictures of what COVID arm looks like. Hey, it's a thing. It's got a name. All right. Let me pull forward here now. Continuing on, the LA Times article says that serious reactions are rare. Scientists use a number of methods, they say here, to look for potential warning signs that vaccines, whether they're for influenza or COVID-19, are causing serious side effects or death. One of the most important tools in this effort is a government database known as the VAERS. Here we are again. The system allows patients or their physicians, family members, lawyers to submit a report of health problem experienced after getting a shot. VAERS is considered the nation's early warning system, giving researchers the first indication that there may be a problem with a particular vaccine. Okay, to date, the database contains more than 50,000 reports of adverse reactions following the 3 vaccines currently authorized, which is the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the J&J. Okay, and they say here that as of the time of the writing of this, fewer than 8,000 of them are categorized as serious. So that works out to a rate of about 50 reports per 1 million doses administered. That sounds pretty mild, right? In fact, again, I know lots of people who had side effects from these shots who never got reported into this database. In fact, we've heard a lot of cases of people all the way up to death not being wrapped into this because it wasn't considered linked in some way to the vaccine itself. So the VAERS, if that's our comprehensive monitoring system, it's the same one that's always been in place. It's relatively imperfect. The way it becomes more perfect is that when you start to see a pattern showing up, whether they're real or not, you next thing you do is you would investigate those. So if you saw 30,000 people show up in the database as having had shortness of breath or dizziness or heart palpitations or whatever the symptom was, you would then be able to start looking at that and focusing in on it. All right. So they coming off of that VAERS thing, they say, well, if you take that at face value per million residents, again, only 50 some cases per million administered doses. Sounds pretty safe. All right. But let's carry on. They do note some of the problems with this above this section here, and then they go on to say, when interpreted properly, VAERS data can help reveal unusual or unexpected outcomes related to all vaccines administered in the U.S. For the COVID-19 vaccines in particular, scientists say they are monitoring VAERS and other data sources for any sign that the shots may be causing an uptick in a long list of health problems. I'd like to know what those other data sources are. Be curious. So far, no such signs have emerged, although researchers have detected very rare occurrences of anaphylaxis, a potentially life-threatening allergic reaction. It's got an important point coming up here. Each year, up to 100 people per 100,000, so 1 in 1,000, experience an anaphylactic reaction triggered by, say, food allergies, insect stings, pollen, latex, anything like that. And roughly 1,000 people in the U.S. die from that alone every year. So they note here that they used the VAERS system to identify a total of 66 cases of anaphylaxis following COVID-19 vaccines administered between December 14th and January 18th. Each case was verified with medical records and in some cases follow-up interviews. With almost 18 million shots administered at that time, that comes out to a rate of 2.5 cases per million doses of Moderna and 4.7 per million of Pfizer. None of these cases were fatal. Doesn't sound too bad. They got a nice chart. Look at this. Anaphylaxis rates are similar for COVID-19 and other common vaccines. Influenza clocks in here at 1.4 per million. Pneumococcal disease at 2.5. Moderna at 2.5. Pfizer at 4.7. But look at this. If you got the shingles vaccine, that thing's clocking in at a hefty 9.6 cases per million. But still, not bad. So, this is kind of weird. So I was reading this and I'm thinking, this is odd because, months ago I was reading about cases where if you go to get these vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, you would then be asked to sit in the waiting room somewhere for 15 minutes while you were observed. And I was reading about how anaphylaxis was common enough that people who would undergo anaphylactic reactions in that waiting room would be whisked off and treated, right? They give you Benadryl. If it gets worse than that, you get intravenous things, stuff, right? But wait a minute. How could I have been reading about people going into anaphylaxis often enough somewhere between 2 and 4 cases per million hardly sounds worth it, right? Would you actually have a whole waiting room set up if you had to administer 1 million shots before you saw 2 or 4 cases? Something wasn't right. So I said, let's go look at the data. Hey, that's what we do here. So I went out and found that there was a really nice research letter out here in March 8th, which, by the way, again, that LA Times article came out in April. So they should have been able to have access to this. Remember, they said they reviewed all the data that was out there. I don't care about modeled data. I'm not interested in the VAERS data. Here's an example of a group that was looking at acute allergic reactions to the mRNA COVID vaccines. And what was this? By the way, this is in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, gold standard allegedly, although they took a ding with some of their reporting, what they ran and didn't run for me earlier this year, but still widely accepted. Check this out. Here's a study. Pretty cool. They prospectively studied Mass General Brigham employees who received their first dose of an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, and with follow-up, the methods here. For 3 days after vaccination, employees completed symptom surveys. So these are health center workers, so I think they probably could be trusted better than average to complete a nice symptom survey through a multi-pronged approach, including email, text messages, phones, whatever, smart phone applications. And acute allergic reaction symptoms were solicited included itching, rash, hives, swelling, and or respiratory symptoms. And to identify anaphylaxis, allergists, immunologists reviewed the electronic health records of employees. So at any rate, they said they could confirm anaphylaxis. So they had a set of standards down there. So this was a study of 60+ thousand people. So this is a really good representative sample. So that's cool what they find. Glad you asked. Look at this results. Out of 64,900 employees who received at least the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and they said 40% received the Pfizer and 60% received the Moderna vaccine. And at least one symptom survey was completed by 52,000 of these people. So we had 52,000 cases, reports to comb through. Look what they saw here. Acute allergic reactions were reported by 1,365 employees. That's 2.1%. Acute allergic reactions. This isn't modeled data. This isn't VAERS. This is an actual study of 65,000 people who got at least one shot, 52,805 who filled out a survey and identified 1,365 of them who had an acute allergic reaction. 2.1%, not to put too fine a point on it, but that's 21,000 people per million. That's what 2.1% works out to. 21,000 per million. Anaphylaxis was confirmed in 16 employees. That was at a 0.025%. That was 7 cases from Pfizer, 9 cases from the Moderna at 0.027% and 0.023%. So what does that work out to at 0.025%? That would be, pull that up because I did the number. That's 250 anaphylaxis cases per million. Listen, it's still kind of rare. But let's be honest. What's the difference between 250 cases per million and 2.5 per million? I don't know, 2 orders of magnitude. It's a lot. So this whole data that was pulled out and put in the LA Times article, it's great. You know, they went to the CDC, they did all of that, but the real world data that we actually have access to, where they go out and they measure what actually happened in people who got this, not what was reported into an imperfect VAERS system, but actually what happened. We find that there are rates of complications or serious adverse events, and I would consider an acute allergic reaction to be a pretty serious event. Again, is 2.1%, is that too many? Does that make this vaccine unsafe? No, but part of informed consent is people should know this. Doctors should know this. So if a doctor's reading the LA Times article or going to the CDC and they're finding out that they should only expect about 2 serious anaphylactic reactions per million, and that other reactions beyond that are very rare, only 50 per million. 50 per million is a very different number from 21,000 per million, right? Those are just different numbers. And I'm not saying let's be totally clear. I'm not saying the 21,000 per million even says we shouldn't do this. I'm just arguing that we should have informed consent, that if you want people to willingly understand what they're doing and why, if you want them to go not be hesitant or be skeptical, just be honest. That's all I'm arguing for here, is let's just be honest. Give people the data. Let them make up their own minds. So this data here that we're looking at, I trust this stuff. I trust this more than I trust the VAERS system. This is an actual study where they took 50,000+ results from people who actually had gotten the mRNA vaccine and added up and asked them what happened. That's pretty good data right there. Much better than a self-reporting system, which frankly is shot through with not good stuff. Because again, it could be too much stuff in there, too little, falsely reported. It also be chased down. But when you take 65,000 healthcare workers and then 51,000 plus of them come back with a reported survey where they're answering these things, that's a higher quality of data to me than self-reported into a anonymized system. All right, so back to this, right? So the CDC says who shouldn't get a shot? Well, they say anybody who has an anaphylactic reaction. It basically means that 250 people out of every million are going to have this reaction. Now we have to ask the question, what do we do with these people? Because you've already probably seen this, and we're all familiar with this idea. There's been these incredible shaming articles that say anybody who isn't vaccinated should be shunned. They shouldn't go to baseball games. We should, exclude them from public transportation. They need to, be identified in some way. They have to wear masks. So what do we do with these people? It's a small number, but what do we do with the 250 per million who aren't going to be able to get that second shot because they aren't candidates for it and therefore they're not fully vaccinated? What do we do with them? And what do we do with if you have a non-severe allergic reaction, you still shouldn't get the shot? According to the Brigham and Women's data, that's 21,000 people per million. Now what are we doing? What do we do with these people? We don't have the answers for those yet. But if we had good data and we had a good discussion, we probably could start answering these questions and we could talk about them. But right now, you're really not supposed to talk about this data because you'll be branded a skeptic or something like that, or hesitant in some way. So that's the most important thing to me is to read something like this research letter here, this one from March 8th in 2021. I got the link down there. Check it out. Pretty good article. Well worth considering. All right. So, skeptic or hesitant, over at our site, Peak Prosperity, I think Kathy put it really well. Kathy said, I think it's disingenuous and intentionally so by the media, big pharma, et cetera, to claim that there is vaccine skepticism. I think in all of this, everyone should weigh the risks for themselves. If I were 65 plus, I'd be far more likely to get the J&J. A 25-year-old male should wait for better options or natural immunity. For a 45-year-old female with comorbidities, an mRNA vaccine might make sense. Being an educated consumer and trying to find the data to become educated doesn't make me a vaccine skeptic. I don't buy a car in the first model year. Why? Because it takes a year to get the kinks out. I don't have car skepticism. That was very well put. And it's true. I'm totally up to date on my tetanus shots. All of that, but I'm not, I want to see more long-term data on the mRNA vaccines in particular for myself. That's me. And so that's where I'm at on this particular story. So that brings us to these conclusions for today. First, I don't like this idea. I hate spinning the medical data. Just give it to us straight, right? What's a case? Where's the cycle threshold? How are we going to look at these things? All of that. Just give it to us straight. Oh, by the way, you want to talk about spin? I got to tell you this. I was going to skip over it, but I can't anymore. In this article here, they had this discussion, this really nice discussion under this paper, and they're trying to spin stuff a little bit. I thought. Let me show you what I picked up here. They say here, however, the overall risk of anaphylaxis to an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine remains extremely low and largely comparable to other common healthcare exposures. Footnote 4. Largely comparable to other common healthcare exposures. That was a little vague for my taste. What do you mean, other common healthcare exposures? So I chased down link 4, footnote 4, and what is it? What are they comparing this to? They say anaphylaxis to iodinated contrast media. What? That's the stuff you get at iodinated contrast media is for when you go for medical imaging. So the best they could do is they could say, the levels of anaphylaxis are about the same as other, how do they put that? Common healthcare exposures. And now, in order to make that normalized and sound okay, they're comparing going in for a medical imaging procedure with receiving an outpatient vaccine shot and saying they're about equivalent. I don't think that's equivalent. That feels like spin to me. That's like trying to say it's not that bad. And it's whether you're going in for medical imaging or you're getting a vaccine shot, you have about the same level of anaphylaxis. Anyway, that's spin. Nice try, but don't spin. Don't bother it. Just give us the data straight. Let us decide for ourselves what our exposure limits are. And by the way, it's going to be different for every person, which risk category they're in and what kind of a decision they want to make. Secondarily, these ever-shifting narratives and spin cycles by the CDC, et cetera, those are destroying their own credibility. They're understandably creating a lot of confusion. It's unnecessary confusion. Just be clear and consistent. If you're going to call something a case, it's a case now, it's a case then. If you're going to say we're going to use this cycle threshold to determine what's an infective or an epidemiologically relevant case, then that's the threshold. Use it. Backdate the other stuff. Explain why you made this shift. This transparency is really important to creating the trust we need in order to proceed with this. All right. Vaccines. They are indeed, main conclusion, largely, mostly, very safe, at least over the short term. We don't have any long-term data yet to analyze because enough time hasn't passed yet. So we don't know. And we may discover things about what's truly on the books for people over the long term. But I think that just needs to be disclosed again. And so I don't want to find that we're weasel wording things, underplaying things, spinning things because we wouldn't want anybody to get the wrong impression. I think that works more against the process of creating the trust necessary than it helps. I think it works against it much, much more rigorously than it actually helps. And again, I understand these people well-meaning. They're thinking, if I tell people this first model car that we're building is probably shot through with bugs, they probably won't buy it. And then we don't get to make a second year, which is going to be amazing. I get it. At the same time, what we're finding in this is that people are turning out to be incredible consumers of data, that they can make really good decisions if you give them the story, and that's what people deserve is full informed consent. And by the way, last conclusion here, whether or not you're going to get the vaccine turns out to be a very personal decision. It might be that you've had a prior experience of anaphylaxis that would be relevant in this particular case. It might be all kinds of things that could actually be part of your story that are very personal and relevant to your story and part of your medical history. And so until we have full informed consent and we have access to all the data, I understand why some people want more data. Okay, that's what I have for conclusions today. By the way, please consider joining us over at Peak Prosperity. Why? 3 things I've listed on the side. Censorship. It's a real thing. You've probably heard me hemming and hawing and dancing around stuff even here. I have to now. That's the nature of the beast. Secondary big piece. So we're going to be having full-throated conversations over there at Peak Prosperity, particularly behind the paywall that we've got. And by the way, Peak Prosperity itself, totally under new management. I am the sole owner of that enterprise at this point in time. My first decision was I removed all the ads from the website because I don't want any of those creepy trolley ads going on over there, and I want the experience to be completely about the data that we're pushing forward and all of that. We have a brand new team that we're working with who's just amazing. You've got Livio behind the camera over here pushing all the buttons and making this all work smoothly and beautifully. And we got other people we're going to let you know about soon to introduce you to this new team. It's all very new and under development as of today. The second piece I want to mention here is the how. What we do at Peak Prosperity is what you just saw here. It's not necessarily what we talk about, it's how we go about it. So as we decode a news article, as we look at data, we're going to do that in the same way around COVID data as we might do around energy data, or might do around alternative energy data or ecological data. Any conversation we're going to have, it's about how we go about having that conversation. That's the part that people are attracted to, about probably why you're still listening, is because we talk about things in a very consistent, very logical way, and we step through it, and we're very transparent with it. I'll give you all my links. You can figure out for yourself. Read this stuff. Don't like it? Think there's a different interpretation? Come on by Peak Prosperity and join the tribe, which is my third bullet point there. We have a great group of people, and I am just the nominal figurehead leading the charge, but really the magic of Peak Prosperity is all the incredibly intelligent people who think like you do, coming by and being part of that and contributing to the conversations we're having there. And then today's ask. Here's my ask of you. You know what? It doesn't have to be this way. We can do better than this. We can be consistent and clear, and we can make sense of things, and we can do things that will give us a future we can believe in. But first, we have to we have to begin following a process that makes sense. And so that's what we do. We're sense makers, and the future can be saved, can be rescued, can turn out a lot better if we start to make sense of things in a very logical, sensible way. So my ask today is for you to share this video with 5 people, and that's how we spread the word. So that's the ask. As well, hit the like button. The algorithms seem to like that. Subscribe if you haven't, or resubscribe if you need to. Again, those are things that are very easy to do. Just click buttons and it happens. And then the YouTube algorithms are happy. But we're going to be running this kind of content over at Peak Prosperity increasingly, and we're going to be doing more and more of it there. And we'll see what we can continue to do out here in public. I just can't risk getting censored, shut down, all of that, simply because I mentioned one of the Dwizzabins, which, by the way, tons of data. They work great. So that's it. Oh, by the way, I gotta continue this. Plant a garden, please. Plant a garden. I'll have more explanation for why that is. My spidey senses are really cooking right now that as we look into the future, this is going to be a great activity for you to engage with. So that's it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. It's been great being with you again here today. I can't wait to do it again, and we will be back with you shortly. Until then, I'll see the rest of you at Peak Prosperity. Bye.